I'm Miss Miller, and this is our video lecture on finding and using textual evidence to support our reading of informational and literary texts. By the end of this video, you will be able to define the word inference, define textual evidence, answer explicit and inferential questions about a literary or informational text, and explain how a reader uses textual evidence to make an inference. Some terms that you will need to know in order to do this are inference. An inference is an educated guess based on information from a text. For example, I'd like for you to read the following paragraph. Tim and Bobby were hot and sweaty as they sat outside the principal's office. Dirt was smeared on both of their faces, and they could hear their teacher's voice as she told the principal what happened on the playground. Tim sneered at Bobby, and Bobby returned the angry glare. Now, from this, the reader can make an educated guess or an inference that Tim and Bobby were fighting on the playground. It doesn't say that explicitly in the text, but we can infer based on evidence from the text that that is what has happened. The next word you'll need to know is the word explicit. Explicit information is information that is obvious in a text. You don't have to guess about it. For example, in this same paragraph about Tim and Bobby, an explicit question might ask, where are Tim and Bobby? You can easily answer that they are sitting outside the principal's office because this is stated clearly in the text. In the first sentence, it says, Tim and Bobby were hot and sweaty as they sat outside the principal's office. The third word that you'll need to know is textual evidence. Textual evidence is specific information from a text used to support an idea about the text. For example, if we're going to infer that Tim and Bobby were fighting, then we must provide textual evidence to support that inference. If you look at this paragraph, I have highlighted the textual evidence that proves that Tim and Bobby were fighting. First, they're at the principal's office. Next, Tim is sneering at Bobby. And finally, Bobby is angry as well. I put all of this together to determine what happened on the playground, and I make a statement. My statement is, I can infer that Tim and Bobby got into a fight on the playground. My first piece of evidence is that they are sitting outside the principal's office. Now, I can't just throw that evidence out there and expect my audience to understand what it means. I must analyze it for my audience, for my reader. Most of the time, kids who sit outside the principal's office have gotten into trouble. Therefore, they must have done something wrong. I've analyzed the information to determine that Tim and Bobby must be in trouble. The second piece of evidence is that Tim is sneering at Bobby. To analyze this, I've determined that a sneer is a really mean way to look at someone. Therefore, I can assume that Tim is angry. And finally, my third piece of evidence is that Bobby is glaring at Tim as well. If Bobby is angry and Tim is angry, then they must have gotten into it on the playground. This is how we effectively respond to our reading. We combine textual evidence with our life experience. I know from textual evidence that Tim and Bobby are sitting outside the principal's office. That is stated explicitly in the text. I know from experience that people who see the principal are often in trouble. Therefore, I can conclude or infer that Tim and Bobby are most likely in trouble if they're sitting outside the principal's office. So let's review our learning targets. Can we define inference? Well, we know that an inference is an educated guess based on evidence from a text. Can we define textual evidence? We know that textual evidence is information in a text that we use to support our ideas about the text. Can we answer explicit and inferential questions about a literary or informational text? Remember that explicit types of questions are those questions where the answer is right there. Where are Tim and Bobby? Tim and Bobby are sitting outside the principal's office. The information is explicit. It is clearly stated in the text. Whereas an inferential question is a question that requires you to draw some conclusions, to apply your own knowledge to the situation. For instance, the question, what happened on the playground? We inferred that Tim and Bobby were fighting on the playground. Finally, can we explain how a reader uses textual evidence to make an inference? Absolutely. A reader uses textual evidence to make an inference by combining their textual evidence with their personal experience to make an inference or an educated guess about the events that have occurred. Your assignment, now that you've met all the learning targets, I would like for you to read the paragraph below and answer the question that follows, providing at least 3 pieces of textual evidence that you analyze using your experience. Here's your paragraph. I sat with my toes in the hot sand, digging a hole with my new shovel and pail. I turned to grab my sandwich and noticed a seagull flying away with it. Since I had no lunch, I grabbed my snorkel and headed into the waves. So the question that I would like for you to answer about this paragraph is, where am I? In your answer, which should be about 1 paragraph long, you're going to find at least 3 pieces of textual evidence to support your statement and analyze each of those pieces of textual evidence using your own experience. That's the end of our video on textual evidence. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.